Hi guys, welcome back to the Early Show with Pastor Jean I, where I share with you news as well as unpack real-world events and offer practical advice, all from a Dharma perspective to help us to navigate the challenges that we face in everyday life. Don't worry, no bike stuff today, but I do want to talk about something that has been asked quite a few times. It is a topic that is frequently raised, but I found the way this question asked to be particularly interesting, the way that it was phrased to be particularly interesting, so I thought that I would share it with you all. So before we continue, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone who has sponsored a video. If you would like to sponsor a video as well, there is a link in the description section of this video where you can go and do that. And with that, let's get started on today's video. So let's talk about capital leverage. What is capital leverage? Capital leverage is connections, money, reputation, and so on. I was asked this question about capital leverage in Buddhism some time ago. Incidentally, when I was in the middle of a 200-kilometer bike ride, I answered the person at the time, but I wanted to share the answer with you because I think that there may be something in the answer that might be beneficial to some people. So the person's actual question was, if sufficient money is attained for a lifetime of personal spiritual practice, number one, is it not enough to solely focus on one's own spiritual development? Number two, or should one pursue capital leverage, money, connections, reputation, etc., even more to, number three, help spiritual centers, people, animals, change the world system, etc., basically help others? And number four, if one chooses to do both, in what ratios and why? How to even go about thinking about those answers? What are we optimizing for? What are some base assumptions? So I told them that I would answer their questions back to front. So I will answer the last question first, all the way back to the first one, because you need to know the basis in order to be able to talk about everything else. So they asked, what is the baseline and what are we optimizing for? The base and what we're optimizing for is what we believe in happens to us after death. Whatever it is that we believe happens to us after death should be what informs our decisions and our actions now. So why do people invest in certain companies? People invest in certain companies on the basis of how they feel the company perform in the future, and that is based on how the company is performing now, based on whatever decisions the board is making now, based on whatever preparations they're observing that the board has made for the future, and so on. So investment is an attempt to make an educated guess, and for most people it's a best guess scenario, but there are some people who try to work out a formula that they feel will help them to deliver or feel will help them to achieve an optimal result. And there are people amongst us who appear to have worked out that formula, and so we look to them for guidance. In investment, it would be people like Warren Buffett. But in Buddhism, the people who have worked out the best formula to get the optimal result are people like the Buddha and people like our gurus. So I repeat, the baseline and what we're optimizing for is what we believe happens to us after death. Whatever we believe will happen to us after death should be what informs our actions and what informs our decisions now. How can we come to a conclusion about what kind of actions and what kind of behavior we should enact with the guidance of people who have achieved the optimal result that we're trying to get, which is the Buddhas and which is our gurus. So the next part of the question is, if I have accumulated the necessary material resources in order to have a comfortable rest of my life, is it not enough for me to focus only on my own spiritual development? And the answer to that is, it's fine, and that there are traditions that do focus on that. And certainly most people are only able at the moment to be able to focus on our own development. However, there will come a time when our spiritual development will plateau, because if only I develop, if only myself develops, if I only focus on myself and I don't include anyone else, have I truly grown? Have I reached the full potential of my spiritual practice? So we have to combine this with the first part of the question, which is, what are we optimizing for? If we're only focusing on ourselves and only focusing on our own development, is our optimal state a state whereby everyone else continues to suffer and only we don't? How spiritual are we, and what is the state of our practice if we can't, or if we are unable to, or if we are unwilling to include other people? So the adage, aim for the stars, and if you don't make it, then you'll hit the moon, and I'm obviously paraphrasing here, applies to us. It applies to our practice. If we aim to include everyone, it is doubtless that we will miss out some people. However, it is also equally doubtless that we will end up including certain people whom we might not have otherwise included. So question, can capital leverage be a part of Buddhism? Can capital leverage be a part of our spiritual practice? And to what extent, to what kind of ratio can capital leverage be a part of our practice, and to what extent or to what ratio should the pursuit of capital leverage be a part of our spiritual practice? Whatever decision is made, if you wish to make capital leverage or the pursuit of capital leverage a part of your spiritual practice, the most important thing is to be as steady and steadfast in your motivation as possible. If you're pursuing capital leverage in order to benefit somebody else, try to make that the core reason you're doing so. For most people, the reality is that our motivation is always shifting. Our motivation does not remain 100% altruistic all of the time, nor does it remain 100% selfish. Even, for example, someone who is painted to be extremely self-serving will always have a handful of people towards whom they generally feel more altruistic towards. So the practice for someone who is pursuing such type of leverage, keep adjusting their motivation back to the original one, to the original altruistic one. And when I talk about adjusting our motivation back to the original one, I'm not just talking about it in relations to the pursuit of capital leverage. I'm also talking about it in other aspects of our spiritual practice as well. For example, when we do retreats or when we do prayers, if we don't keep our motivation to be one of pure altruism, to be one of compassion, to be one of bodhicitta, even retreat can become harmful to our practice. For example, it can become something that boosts our ego instead of becoming a cause for us to practice humility. Oh, I'm doing retreat this week. I'll be in retreat for the entire week. Wow, that's amazing. You are so devoted. Did you know that I've done 1 million mandala offerings? I've even made a hole in my mandala set. That's incredible. You're incredible. It would be unrealistic for us to say that the pursuit of capital leverage is completely unnecessary and should not be a part of our spiritual practice, because the reality is that we have taken rebirth in a world and with a system that means that certain knowledge or certain institutions can only exist or can only proliferate with economic support. For example, Buddhism. Buddhism very heavily relies on the kindness of sponsors. The sponsors, through their support, make it possible for the monasteries to stay open and makes it possible for the monks to focus on practice, to focus on study, to focus on teaching. If a monk or a teacher had to focus on farming or had to focus on dealing with students, had to focus on, administrative things and so on, it would dilute what it is that they're able to do. So imagine if someone like His Holiness the Dalai Lama had to spend all of his time dealing with sponsors, how would he be able to discharge the rest of his duties and do all of the things and carry out all of the activities that we admire and respect him for? If an orphanage director has to keep focusing on raising funds, how can they give their full care to nurturing and to educating the people who are under their charge? Now, capital leverage and the pursuit of it won't take up all of our time. So in the moments between the pursuit, the question is, what are we going to do? Because even if we make the pursuit of capital leverage a part of our spiritual practice, the reality is that at the moment of our death and at the moment of our passing, we will not be able to take with us any of the leverage that we have accumulated. And so it falls to us to still engage in activities that will help to prepare us for the moment of our passing. Under the umbrella of the activities that we can do and we can engage in are things like retreats, things like meditation, and things like more practice and more study. Meditations, retreats, and practices not only will help us at the time of death, but if we engage in them consistently, they will help give us education, help give us knowledge, help give us information, which will then help us to realign our motivation in the pursuit of our capital leverage, as well as helping us to create the foundation and basis for our success, which is karma. So last question. The question of ratios. Generally speaking, there is no specific ratio for people to abide by, because what works for one person may not necessarily work for someone else. When we have a spiritual guide, our spiritual guide will train us and will guide us and will give us instructions. So naturally, we will just follow that. In the absence of a spiritual guide, how we can make our decisions is based on compassion and based on wisdom. So if we combine our motivation together with compassion and wisdom, that is another way that we can transform the pursuit of capital leverage into part of our spiritual practice. For example, someone who pursues a good reputation or pursues celebrityhood in order to gain a wider audience so that they can spread Dharma to them, can therefore make the pursuit of reputation and that form of capital leverage as part of their spiritual practice. So in summary, the pursuit of capital leverage and the pursuit of things like wealth and reputation and so on are not inherently bad if they are done with a good motivation. Now, at our stage, it's not easy for us to constantly and consistently practice a good motivation, but it's made easier when we increase our study and we increase things like our meditative practice and our meditation sessions in order to increase our mental clarity, to increase our wisdom, and to increase our awareness. The key for us is to keep revisiting and to keep realigning our motivation and to practice doing this over and over again. Each time we feel it slipping, to readjust it, and keep readjusting it until we find that having this motivation to benefit others comes naturally and comes consistently to us. Alright, so there's your answer for can capital leverage be a part of Buddhism, be a part of our spiritual practice. I hope that there was something in this week's sharing that you found useful, that you found beneficial. If anything wasn't clear, please ask, please let me know. And if you've got any questions of your own, no matter how weird you think it is, no matter how basic you think it is, no matter how strange you think it is, please ask, and I'll be more than happy to do my best to try and answer it for you. Thank you guys so much for watching. This is Dharma Breakdown for this week, and I'll see you guys next Sunday. Bye! Welcome to this week's It's a Plant-Based Life, where we talk about plant-based news, plant-based products, plant-based facts, and basically everything that you need to know in order to live a more plant-based life. Last week we talked about moving to a plant-based diet and the kind of impact that will have on our planet. This week I want to talk about something that's a little bit along those lines as well, except it's from the perspective of something that's a little bit more hidden, something that the privileged among us don't really have to think about on a day-to-day basis, and that is water. We already know that raising animals for food is the single largest contributor to wildlife extinction because we're constantly destroying rainforests in order to create more land, either to raise animals on or to grow the crops to feed them. But the other hidden issue is the huge water footprint that comes along with raising livestock to produce meat. According to National Geographic, your diet is probably the biggest slice of your water footprint, especially if you eat meat from cows and other animals fed with water-intensive crops such as corn. Cutting consumption of animal products in half would reduce the US's dietary requirements of water by 37%. The average US diet currently takes 1,320 gallons or 4,997 liters of water a day to produce. According to the Water Footprint Network, to produce a single kilogram of pork, it requires 5,990 liters of water. To produce a 225 milliliter glass of milk, 1,020 liters of water are required. Per kilogram of beef, 15,400 liters of water is required just to raise a kilogram of beef. This figure includes irrigation of grains and grasses for the feed, as well as water for drinking and for processing. So if you consider just how many people in the world have to live without access to clean water, have to live without access to adequate sanitation, have to live in a drought-ridden area, who have to deal with water insecurity every single day, it seems crazy to use so much water just for one burger, just for one meal. The reality is that clean drinking water is not an infinite resource, yet millions of gallons every single day is being diverted to supporting livestock and to growing their feed, whilst millions more is being polluted as a result of livestock farming. All of this is happening as well whilst we're being told to take shorter showers, to flush the toilet less and so on, all in order to conserve water. But if water conservation is the real issue, then surely it would make sense for us to take steps to conserve water in the fastest and most efficient way possible. So which one's more efficient and which one's easier? To abstain from a hamburger at lunch or to abstain from months of showers? It's your choice. You don't have to give up meat completely and you don't have to go cold turkey immediately. But the point is that each time you order meat, each time you buy meat, to think about what it is that you're ordering, to think about what it is that you're buying, and to think about the choice that you're making, the depth and breadth of your decision, and how much suffering is connected to your choice. The suffering is not just in the animal that has lost its life so that you can satisfy your taste buds, but the suffering is also in the people who are negatively impacted as a result of livestock farming. So again, I'm not saying give up meat completely, I'm not saying give up meat immediately, I'm not saying go cold turkey, but I'm saying that each time you make a choice to order meat, to think about the choice that you're making. Think about the impact of the choice that you're making, and think, will you suffer if you make a different choice? Will you truly suffer if you make a plant-based choice? That's it for me for this week's It's a Plant-Based Life. I hope that this short segment gave you a little bit more to think about, a little more food for thought in terms of your meat consumption. As ever, there are plenty of resources available online for free, so do read up and do keep educating yourself, and I will see you guys next week. Bye. Welcome to this week's weekly roundup, where I talk about things that are going on throughout the organization, as well as talk about events that are coming up. This week has been a completely full-on week, starting on Sunday with the virtual Lamrim class as usual being held online. We finished week 7 of a 38-week course. Work is also continuing on the Tsem outdoor Relic Stupa. So on Monday, nice bright and early at 7:30 in the morning, the puja house team did a consecration puja where they consecrated the land where the earth vase is going to be lowered into the ground underneath the outdoor Relic Stupa. They started by reciting Ganan Hagyama, which is the Guru Yoga on Lama Tsongkhapa, before reciting Mixema, and then they engaged in the Tsem Guru Yoga. This was followed by a recitation of Naduk Chaduk, followed by the recitation of Tsem Swift Return Prayer before they recited dedication prayers. And don't forget, Qingming is coming up on April the 4th, and Qingming is a Chinese cultural festival that's celebrated to honor our dearly departed loved ones. Traditionally, Qingming is observed by going to the burial site and cleaning up the burial site of our deceased relatives before we make offerings of food, incense, and burning just paper offerings to create good fortune for those in the afterlife. Now, thanks to the restrictions this year, we're not able to observe Qingming in the traditional way, but there are still things that can be done in order to create merit to be dedicated to those who are dearly departed. And if you go to vadrasecrets.com, you'll see many ways that you can make offerings to dedicate this merit to your loved ones. I also hope that you guys were able to take in JP Tong's Detox Your Mind class, which was on March the 13th on Experience. If you weren't able to at the time, you can always revisit the video, but I do highly recommend actually signing up for the class so that you can take part in the private workshop that happens immediately after the live stream. The next Detox Your Mind session is on March the 20th, and it's going to be on the topic of keeping ourselves busy. So don't forget, make sure that you sign up as soon as possible. In fact, do it immediately after this video. That's it from me for this week. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. As ever, if you've got any questions at all, please feel free to ask me and I will do my best to answer them for you. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for joining me, and don't forget to be kind to each other.